Hello everyone. So today we are going to discuss about pedigree analysis. A lot of competitive exams like INGS, so NEET, they just ask question based on this pedigree, and students they tend to get very confused about this, and they don't know how to go ahead with all with these type of questions. They don't know. They don't have basic idea. They tend to have some fear about it. So today I would be giving you some basic idea about how to go ahead with the pedigree analysis and how to solve those pedigree based questions. And I will also try to give you some basic tricks so that you will be able to understand and have a quick answer just by looking at the pedigree. Okay, so let us start. So in order to go ahead with the pedigree based question, you first of all you should know that on the basic symbol that are given in pedigree, and you should know what each symbol it represent, which kind of thing, right? So if there is a circle given in the pedigree, it is showing, it is a sign, it is the one that is representing a female individual, and if it is a square, it is representing a male individual. If any of these, like female or male, these square or this circle, if it is all darkened like this, the one that is given here, then that particular individual is said to be affected with the a particular trait or a disorder, you can say, right? So you should know these symbols really well, and then you should know that this is the first generation here, this is the second generation over here, right? So in first generation, this is the female, this is the male individual, and the line between these two individual is actually representing the marriage line, means they must have been wedded together. And this downward line is actually representing the, it is actually the line of descent, which is showing that these two individuals when wedded together give rise to second generation, like this one and this one. So these are the children of these individual, and this is the male child and this is the female child. And since they have been produced from these parents, so these must be, they must be siblings. So this whole line is actually representing the siblings together, right? So these are the basic idea that of this pedigree analysis you should know. Then we have some diseased twins and adopted as well, and this is a sign for miscarriage. So this is a basic idea that you should know in order to go ahead with pedigree analysis question. Now there are certain rules to solve pedigree question. Like whenever you are moving ahead with pedigree question, you should know, you should have some idea, basic idea, that how to go ahead with all the pedigree questions. So before proceeding with that, I would like you to understand one thing. Like if I'm talking about human beings, we have in total 46 chromosome in our cell, and among like out of those 46 chromosome, 44 chromosomes are said to be autosomals, and the last pair of chromosome, it is either XX, of course if it is the female individual, and it can be as 44 plus XY if it is the male individual, right? So if the defective allele is present, if the defective allele is present in these chromosome, then the disease is going to be autosomal, or the disorder is going to be autosomal, because the defective allele is present in one of these autosome chromosome, right? And if the defective allele is actually present on these chromosome, the last pair of chromosome, either X or Y, then the disease or disorder going is said to be sex-linked disorder. Usually it is X-linked disorder. X-linked disorder, you can say these are more common since X is present in female as well as male, but Y is present in only males. It is a chromosome that is present only in males, so the frequency of occurring Y-linked disease is much more less than what we have in X-linked trait, right? So these are the basic. Now based on all these things, I can say that actually the disorder can be of four types: autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, or sex-linked dominant or sex-linked recessive. So let us understand this, write it up. The given pedigree analysis, it can be basically of four types. The very first one is your autosomal dominant. Then it could be autosomal recessive. It could be X-linked dominant. Well, I'm taking X-linked as these are the most common one, that is why. And it could be X-linked recessive. Right, so four types of disorder can be there. Now let us talk about the very first thing, that what will be the genotype of the individual if they will be having these type of disorder. Okay, so in the case of autosomal dominant, the affected individual must have the genotype in either homozygous dominant condition or heterozygous condition. Okay, as homozygous dominant, since the disorder is dominant type, it is going to express itself and cause the disorder, cause the disease. And in the case of heterozygous condition, dominant allele is going to express itself and again going to cause the disease in the individual, right? So autosomal dominant affected individual will be having either this or this type of genotype. In the case of autosomal recessive, the genotype will be homozygous recessive. It will be in homozygous recessive condition. Now if I talk about X-linked dominant disease, of course the affected allele, in the defective allele, it will be present on females. In case of female, it will be present on X chromosome, and in the case of male, it will be present in XY. So in the case of male, since either only one X is present, and the disorder we are talking about dominant, it will be dominant for the defective allele will be present in the dominant position, in the dominant condition in X chromosome, while in the case of female, it can be in homozygous or it can be in heterozygous condition. Right, now if I talk about X-linked recessive, in the case of female, it must be present in the case of recessive homozygous recessive condition, while in the case of male, only single X is present, and it will be having this recessive allele present in it for this particular disease, right? So these are going to be the genotype for these four types of disorder. Now another thing that you can note here, that will give you a direct idea whether the disease is autosomal recessive, autosomal dominant, or X-linked dominant, X-linked recessive. It is that in the very first case, in the case of autosomal dominant, you will be able to see that affected parents can have unaffected children. So we will just look at the pedigree, and if you will notice that affected, there are two parents, that those who are affected but they are producing unaffected children, then of course that the pedigree will be autosomal dominant only. Then in the case of autosomal recessive, you can notice that unaffected parents can have affected children. So if you will just look at the pedigree, and you will notice, yes, yeah, parents are unaffected but they are having affected children, then you will have the direct idea that yes, this pedigree has to be autosomal recessive one. Just like that, in the case of X-linked dominant one, you will be having a clear sign that all the daughter all daughter of an affected father will be affected. So an affected father will be giving the disease directly to all the daughters of his, right? And in the case of X-linked recessive, you will notice the number of males individual is more as compared to female. And also this type of inheritance, so commonly the X-linked type of inheritance is shows crisscross type of inheritance. So here what will be happening, that father will be passing on its disease to his daughter, while mother will be passing on its disease to son. None of the disease will be passed on directly from father to son. No. In X-linked recessive condition, this case won't be there. Father will be passing the trait for the disease directly to the daughter, and mother will be passing to the son. So these are the basic signs that you can notice in order to solve the pedigree questions. Okay. Now, next one. Whenever you will be starting with the solving the question, you need to look for some signs, and you need to proceed gradually by following some steps. Okay, so the very first step that you need to follow is that you should always first look that whether the given pedigree is dominant type or it is of recessive type, whether it is dominant type or it is recessive type. So whether it is dominant or it is recessive type, right? So if you're looking at the pedigree and you are able to notice that none of the generation is being skipped, like all the generation, whether it is first, second, third, fourth, whatever it is, all the generation after all the generations, like one generation, second generation, third generation, all the generation will be having affected individual, and there is no skipping of generations. So no skipping of generation. So in this case, if all the generation is showing the affected individual, you can say that yes, this trait must be dominant. Okay, and if you will notice that one of the generation is skipped, like first is having affected individual, then second doesn't have any affected individual, and again third is having affected individual. So if one of the generation is skipped, then the trait will be recessive. So there will be skipping of generation. Okay, now second thing that you would be able to notice, and you have to identify whether the disease is autosomal or it is the recessive one. So we have already talked about some very precise sign in order to indicate whether it is the autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, or X-linked dominant or X-linked recessive. But again, in order to have or if the pedigree is showing autosomal diseases, then you will be able to notice that the number of affected male will be somewhat equal to number of affected female. Yeah. Okay, so 50% will be male and 50% will be female, then the case is autosomal type. And if I'm talking about, sorry, by mistake I've written recessive over here. I need to see whether the disease is autosomal or it is the X-linked type. So if the disease is showing the X-linked condition, you must see, you will be able to notice that more males will be affected. And of course one of the sign that it will be showing crisscross inheritance. So father will be passing the trait to daughter and mother will be passing the trait to son. So crisscross inheritance will be there. So by looking at these signs, you will be able to notice whether the individual it is like whether the individual is actually uh, having dominant characters or recessive, or it is going to have autosomal disease or the X-linked disease. So this is for the basic idea and how to proceed with the several pedigree analysis questions. And in our next video in my next video I'm going to talk about, or we will take some example in order to understand the pedigree analysis